The events took place in the fictional Blackwood County, Oregon, on a freezing, damp November evening in 2026. The rain hammered against the roof of the patrol pickup so loudly that Sergeant Colin Reed could barely hear the dispatcher's voice through the radio static. Sitting in the passenger seat beside him was rookie David Mason, a young guy who hadn't yet grown cynical about the idealistic instructions taught in the police academy. The clock read 11:42 p.m. They were parked on the shoulder of Mile 40, a deserted highway winding through dense spruce forests where cell service dropped out more frequently than passing cars. Outside the patrol car, absolute darkness reigned, pierced only by the sweep of headlights catching falling raindrops and tangled branches. At that moment, an old, road-dust-covered van without a rear license plate roared past them at cruising speed. Reed instinctively glanced in the rearview mirror. The van's headlights were misaligned. The left one pointed a fraction too high, blinding oncoming drivers and casting an odd, harsh glare in the mirrors. "Bad lighting and no plate," Reed muttered, pressing his foot down on the accelerator and turning on the ignition. "Let's go check where he's in such a rush on a night like this." The patrol pickup's engine roared, steadying its RPMs. 2 minutes later, their blue flashers illuminated the wet tree trunks as the van obediently pulled onto the shoulder and came to a halt amid clouds of road dust and spray. Reed stepped out into the cold rain, pulling the hood of his uniform jacket over his head. Mason followed close behind, his hand resting on his holster out of habit, even though the road looked completely dead. The air smelled of wet pine needles, ozone, and burnt rubber dust. Behind the wheel of the van sat a man in his 40s wearing a worn-out trucker jacket. His face was pale, his hands tapped nervously on the steering wheel, and several plastic canisters and a pair of padded fishing tackle boxes covered by a tarp were visible in the back seat. "Good evening, Blackwood County Highway Patrol," Reed said, shining his flashlight into the cabin. "You're driving without a rear license plate, my friend." The driver tried to smile, but it looked forced, his lips trembling slightly. "Officer, I lost it out of town on a dirt road. A branch caught the bumper and ripped the plate right off in the mud. I'm just heading to a garage in the next town over." Everything looked mundane, just another minor violator trying to cut through a forest road. Reed asked for documents. The driver handed over a frayed driver's license bearing the name Thomas King. The onboard computer ran the check. Clean. No unpaid fines, no warrants, a regular citizen. Meanwhile, Mason walked around the back of the van to inspect the bodywork and rear suspension. His attention was caught by a strange odor drifting from beneath the vehicle's undercarriage. It wasn't gasoline or motor oil. It smelled like damp earth, fresh paint, and something sharp resembling a medical antiseptic mixed with chlorine. Mason bent down and shone his light under the rear wheel well. Tucked inside the fender was a compact black metal box secured by powerful neodymium magnets. A digital keypad and a tiny blinking green indicator light flickered in time with the raindrops. "Sergeant, come take a look at this," Mason called out, trying to keep his voice calm, though tension was already evident in his tone. Reed left the driver at the cab and walked over to his partner. "What is it?" "I don't know, but those definitely aren't fishing tools." Reed returned to the driver and asked him to kill the engine and step out of the vehicle. King's expression changed instantly. In a split second, he transformed from a tired working-class driver into a cornered predator, panic flashing in his eyes. "You have no right to detain me, officer. I didn't do anything wrong." King raised his voice, violently jerking the door open from the inside. Mason moved faster than the driver could jump out. He grabbed the man's wrist and pinned him against the hood of the van. At that moment, a heavy, metallic object slipped from King's pocket and fell with a dull thud into the wet leaves. Reed picked it up. It was a portable military cryptographic communication terminal locked with a 5-digit password. Its display showed a single line of text: "Data transfer packet interrupted." The situation was no longer a routine document check. Reed called the county dispatcher, requesting backup and an explosives ordnance disposal team, but the radio output only static. Due to the dense terrain and forest canopy, communication with the station had completely cut out. "Who's your client, King?" Reed asked sternly, restraining the suspect. "What are you hauling in that magnetic container?" King stayed silent, staring darkly into the woods. But the answer didn't come from his confession. It came from the roar of an approaching engine. A black SUV with no markings tore around the curve at high speed. It had no intention of slowing down. "Get down!" Reed shouted, shoving the rookie and the suspect deep into the roadside ditch. The SUV screamed past, spraying them with mud, executed a tight J-turn on the narrow road, and blocked the highway from the front. 3 men in heavy tactical gear without insignia, holding automatic carbines, leaped out of the doors. "Federal Security Service, step away from the vehicle," commanded a man in a balaclava, pointing his weapon straight at the patrolman. Reed slowly raised his hands, keeping his eyes locked on the barrel of the carbine while stepping protectively in front of the rookie. "Blackwood County Traffic Cop, identify your unit and show your badges." The man chuckled behind his mask. "Sergeant, you've wandered into something you shouldn't have. Hand over that terminal and forget you ever stopped this van. In a minute, this vehicle will be gone, and you two will be reassigned to patrol the furthest dead ends in the state." Mason lay in the grass, holding his radio, when he suddenly noticed a detail the paramilitary thugs had missed. Mounted on the roof of their SUV was an older generation satellite repeater, the kind used by private corporate security contractors rather than state or federal law enforcement agencies. Real feds didn't operate on rural forest roads using the tactics of 90s action movie mercenaries. "Sergeant, they're not FBI," Mason whispered, looking up from the ground through the wet grass at Reed. "Look at their magazine pouches and webbing. That's gear from Crescent Private Security, the same firm that won the contract to guard the secret biolaboratory 40 miles up the road." Reed instantly pieced it together. The van wasn't carrying a bomb or traditional contraband. It was hauling documented hazardous waste samples from the laboratory, which management was trying to sneak past federal environmental inspectors to cover up chemical leaks into the county's groundwater and avoid multi-billion-dollar lawsuits. "Wrong address, boys," Reed said loudly, standing up to his full height in the rain, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "We've already logged the van's coordinates, uploaded a backup data packet to our dashboard camera, and that recording was sent to the department's cloud storage before you jammed the local cellular frequencies." The leader of the masked men froze for a fraction of a second. That fraction of a second was all an experienced cop needed. With a sharp movement, Reed unholstered the signal flare pistol from the patrol cruiser and fired it straight up into the air. A brilliant red flare illuminated the dark forest, reflecting in the raindrops for miles around. In the distance, answering back from the old forestry checkpoint, the flashing blue light of a backup patrol unit rushed toward them over the old backup radio frequency. The men in black exchanged glances. Engaging in a firefight with active-duty police officers in front of arriving reinforcements was clearly not part of their plan. "You're gonna regret this, Sergeant," the group's leader spat, retreating toward their SUV. 10 seconds later, the black Jeep vanished into the darkness of the forest road with its lights killed, leaving behind only tread marks on the wet asphalt and a stunned driver who had just lost his backup. By 9 o'clock the following morning, the incident at mile 40 was no longer a minor case of a missing rear bumper. A federal environmental oversight investigative team arrived at the scene. The Crescent Laboratory was sealed off, its management arrested on charges of illegal transportation of hazardous materials and attempting to intimidate law enforcement officers, while the locked cryptographic terminal became the prime piece of evidence in a sweeping probe monitored across the entire state. Back in the sheriff's office, Reed sipped hot coffee while watching rookie Mason sort through paperwork and incident reports. "You know, Sergeant," the young partner said thoughtfully, taking a sip from a paper cup, "last night I thought we were just stopping some random working guy without a license plate. Turns out a simple check on a deserted road can unearth a whole empire of lies and corruption." Reed set his mug down on the desk and looked out the window at the sunlit station yard, where the familiar bustle of daily work was already in full swing. "In our line of work, the most important thing is never to take at face value those who wear their uniforms too loudly, nor those trying to convince you that you've just interfered in matters outside your pay grade. The road always brings everything back to its proper place, as long as you have the courage to look beneath the wheel well when it counts, and aren't afraid to ask the right questions." 3 months passed since that rainy night when Sergeant Colin Reed and rookie David Mason intercepted the van on mile 40. The Crescent Laboratory had been completely shut down, its management put on trial for covering up an environmental disaster, and the incident itself entered Academy textbooks as an example of a patrol unit's ideal vigilance. Mason successfully completed his probation and received his permanent badge, while Reed was nominated for a Medal of Valor. However, silence in Blackwood County rarely lasts long. It was a late February evening in 2027. A powerful snowstorm was rolling in, blanketing the roads in a thick layer of wet snow. Visibility on the highway dropped to a minimum, and the temperature was plummeting toward freezing. Reed and Mason were patrolling that exact northern stretch of the highway when the dashboard communication system began flashing an error indicator. "Are the repeaters getting jammed again, or is the weather just acting up?" Mason asked, slouching behind the pickup's steering wheel and peering into the whiteout beyond the windshield. "In weather like this, the wind can knock down just about anything, but the radio link to the old weather station dropped out too abruptly," Reed replied, checking his tablet. "The dispatcher says a perimeter motion sensor triggered near the abandoned quarry. Let's go check it out, just in case someone got stuck in the drifts." The road to the quarry was a snow-covered dirt track, winding between steep drop-offs and iced-over cliffs. The powerful pickup's headlights snatched bizarre shapes out of the dark snowdrifts. 15 minutes later, they saw a strange sight. Parked on the edge of the abandoned quarry was a heavy-tracked snow groomer belonging to Crescent, the very company that had officially ceased operations 3 months ago. The vehicle had been abandoned, with its cab door wide open, and the engine was still idling, its exhaust pipe puffing thick gray clouds of smoke. Mason carefully parked the patrol pickup 20 meters behind, leaving room to maneuver. Reed reached for his radio, but the speaker emitted only a harsh, grinding crackle. They stepped outside. The freezing wind bit right through to their bones, hurling stinging snowflakes into their faces. Reed switched on his weapon-mounted flashlight, its beam cutting through the white haze. "Look," Mason pointed to a set of fresh footprints leading away from the abandoned tracked vehicle, deep into the fenced-off territory of the quarry, toward the abandoned hangars of the former mining company. They advanced along the tracks, weapons at the ready. Eerie silence surrounded them, broken only by the howling of the wind tearing through the metal structures of the hangars. Approaching the central building, they noticed that the massive steel hangar door had been ripped off its hinges. A heavy hydraulic cutter lay discarded in the snow, alongside several empty plastic barrels that smelled of the exact same pungent antiseptic from that November night. "Looks like someone is tying up the loose ends the feds didn't manage to find during the previous searches," Mason whispered, stepping across the hangar threshold. Inside, it was dark and damp. The flashlight beam swept across concrete walls covered in frost. In the far corner stood a large, armored container bearing biological hazard markings. The container door stood wide open, and absolute emptiness yawned within. At that exact moment, a metallic screech echoed behind their backs. Mason whipped around, sweeping his light toward the source of the sound. The heavy hangar door, ripped from its tracks, had finally succumbed to a powerful gust of wind, tearing off its safety cables and crashing down to bar the only exit to the outside world. "Damn it!" Mason cursed, running up to the fallen door and trying to shove it. The metal weighed hundreds of pounds. Two men bare-handed in the snow couldn't possibly budge it. "Calm down, no panic." Reed's voice was firm, though the situation grew more precarious by the second. "We have a backup beacon in our radios and a portable satellite terminal in the truck's glove box." Before they could take another step, a quiet, spine-chilling rifle bolt click rang out from the shadows of the hangar's side utility rooms. "Drop your flashlights on the concrete, officers." A cold, metallic voice echoed from the darkness, belonging to a man they least expected to find here. Stepping out of the gloom was a tall man wearing the gray tactical gear of a private security operative. He held a shortened carbine with a suppressor aimed straight at them. A jagged scar crossed the man's cheek, and his eyes held nothing but cold calculation. It was Arthur Vance, former head of security for the Crescent Lab, who had managed to slip away before federal agents arrived with their warrants. "Ah, Sergeant Reed and your young partner," Vance smirked, taking a step forward. "You really messed up our plans last time. Thought you beat the system, huh? Thought you wrapped everything up neatly?" Mason tensed, calculating the distance to cover by a concrete pillar, but Vance cut off his thoughts. "Don't even try it, kid. That container didn't just hold biological waste. It held strains of a newly modified flora capable of wiping out the entire root system of the county's forest reserve in a matter of weeks if aerosolized properly into the groundwater. And buyers are already waiting for this cargo 100 miles from here. You think you can cover your tracks a second time?" Reed stepped forward, shielding the rookie with his body and trying to buy precious seconds to quietly press the emergency beacon button hidden under his collar. "The feds already know everything about you. Every hangar, every account, your every move." "Feds?" Vance laughed derisively. "While the feds are pushing paper in Washington, we'll be far beyond national borders. And you two? Well, the official story will sound very convincing. Lost in a blizzard on mile 40, frozen in an abandoned quarry. Winter storms spare no one." At that moment, Reed felt a slight vibration under his collar. The transmitter's emergency signal had gone out into the ether. But would it punch through the thick hangar walls and the snowstorm? Vance took another step, raising the carbine barrel slightly, aiming straight for the sergeant's chest. "Goodbye, heroes of mile 40, he said, his finger beginning a smooth squeeze on the trigger. In the very next second, however, the hangar roof above their heads emitted a deafening crack. A steel roofing sheet, rotted by time and unable to support the weight of tons of snow accumulated throughout the day, gave way under a violent gust of hurricane-force wind. A massive cascade of snow, ice, and debris crashed straight down onto Vance's position, knocking him to the floor and pinning him alongside his weapon. Vance howled in pain, trying to pull his arm free from beneath the snow pile, but his carbine had flown away, lost in the dark. Mason didn't hesitate for a split second. He sprinted over to the fallen operative, grabbed his arms, and instantly snapped heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists, securing him to a reinforcing rebar protruding from the wall. Reed rushed toward the blocked hangar door. Using the hydraulic cutter left behind by the criminals, he sliced through the jammed mechanism's hinge in a few quick motions and shoved the heavy metal panel outward. The bright headlights of a second backup patrol unit that had just arrived cut through the gloom. Outside, the storm was beginning to die down, leaving behind a clear, starry sky over the snow-covered forest. A week later, the Blackwood County Sheriff's Office was warm again. Fresh government reports lay on the desk, officially closing the Crescent Lab case and seizing the final financial assets of the fugitive contractors. Mason sat at his desk, sipping hot tea, looking down at the report spread out before him. "You know, Sergeant," he smiled, looking over at Reed, "now I'm completely convinced that Mile 40 is the strangest place in the state of Oregon." Reed walked over to the window, where the morning sun was shining brightly, melting the remnants of yesterday's storm off the roofs of the patrol cars. "It's not the place that's strange, David. It's just that the road always tests a man's resilience when he least expects it. The main thing is to always stay on your guard and know that behind every turn, something more than just a missing license plate might be waiting."